2 crumpled $100 bills were the price of a desperate lie. Pushing the money across the sticky diner table, she just wanted a fake date for her sister's wedding, someone to stand beside her 280-pound frame. While he possessed the lethal grace of a runway model, she assumed she was merely renting a struggling actor. She had absolutely no idea she had just bought the time of the ruthless head of the Chicago syndicate. Linda Jenkins stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror of her cramped Chicago apartment, tears blurring her vision. The custom-ordered size 24 burgundy gown from David's bridal fit. But in her eyes, it only highlighted every roll, every curve she had spent her life trying to hide. She was fat. There was no sugarcoating it, no polite, curvy, or big-boned euphemism that erased the reality of being 280 pounds in a society that worshipped the thin. Tonight was her younger sister Savannah's wedding at the prestigious Drake Hotel. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but for Linda it was an impending execution. The best man at this lavish affair was Samuel, Linda's ex-boyfriend. Samuel, a junior vice president at Morgan Stanley, had dumped her 3 years ago in the most humiliating way possible, by leaving a gym membership brochure and a box of diet shakes on her kitchen counter with a post-it note that read, "I need someone who cares about themselves." He was bringing his new fiancée, a Pilates instructor who wore a size 0. Linda knew the pitying looks her family would give her. She knew her mother, Brenda, would sigh heavily and offer her a salad. She couldn't face them alone. She just couldn't. Which was why, 48 hours prior, in a moment of pure, pathetic desperation, Linda had posted an ad on Craigslist. Wanted, male companion for a high society wedding. Must own a decent suit and be willing to pretend we are madly in love for exactly 4 hours. Paying $200 cash plus access to an open bar and a prime rib dinner. No weirdos. She had arranged to meet the only respondent who didn't send a lewd photograph at a 24-hour diner off Interstate 90. The diner smelled of stale coffee and grease. Linda sat in the corner booth, nervously shredding a paper napkin, the 2 crisp $100 bills burning a hole in her cheap faux leather purse. The bell above the door jingled. A man walked in, and the air in the diner seemed to physically shift. He was at least 6'3", with shoulders broad enough to eclipse the neon sign in the window. His hair was thick, dark, and swept back with effortless precision. His jawline looked sharp enough to cut glass, covered in a faint shadow of stubble. But it was his suit that caught her eye. A dark navy, immaculate 3-piece that draped over his muscular frame like liquid shadow. It looked expensive. Too expensive. Linda immediately assumed he worked at a high-end department store and had borrowed it from the racks. He paused, scanning the room. His dark eyes locked onto Linda, who was nervously tapping her phone with the Craigslist ad open. He strode toward her booth with the predatory grace of a large jungle cat. He slid into the vinyl seat across from her, the booth groaning slightly under his weight. "You're the $200 guy?" Linda blurted out, her voice cracking. The man blinked, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his stoic features before his lips curled into a slow, devastatingly handsome smirk. "I can be." His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone that sent a sudden, unbidden shiver down Linda's spine. "I'm Linda," she said, trying to maintain her composure. She pushed the 2 bills across the table. "Here's the deal. My ex is going to be there. He's a jerk. My family is going to look at me like I'm a tragic charity case because well, you have eyes. I take up space. I just need you to hold my hand, tell a few believable lies about how we met at a bookstore, and look at me like I actually matter." Nicholas Russo stared at the woman across from him. 10 minutes ago, Nicholas hadn't been looking for a fake dating gig. He was the reigning boss of the Russo crime family, overseeing a multi-million-dollar illicit empire stretching from Chicago to New York. He had entered this dingy diner to execute a clandestine handover with an informant. But the moment he walked in, he spotted 2 heavily armed scouts from the rival Moretti cartel sitting at the counter, watching the door. He needed an immediate cover. He saw Linda waving her phone, desperately looking for someone, and he improvised. Now, looking at the 2 crumpled bills and the vulnerable defensive fire in this beautiful, full-figured woman's eyes, Nicholas felt something he hadn't felt in a decade. Amusement. And beneath that, a flicker of deep, protective instinct. She was terrified of being judged, yet she was fiercely laying out her terms. $200, Nicholas rumbled, his thick fingers lightly brushing the bills before pushing them back toward her. Keep the money for now, Linda. Pay me when the night is over. What's my name? The email said DR, so Daniel, David, Nicholas, he said smoothly. Nicholas Russo. Okay, Nicholas, Linda sighed, relieved that he wasn't a total creep, even if his intense stare made her blood run hot. Do you have a car, or should I call an Uber Black? I don't want us pulling up to the Drake Hotel in a 1998 Honda Civic. Nicholas's smirk widened. I have transportation. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something that makes you feel dangerous. At exactly 7 p.m., a pristine, matte black armored Audi A8 glided to a halt in front of Linda's apartment building. Linda, hyperventilating in her burgundy gown, stepped out onto the sidewalk. The rear door opened, and Nicholas stepped out. If he looked intimidating in the diner, he looked downright lethal tonight. He wore a different suit, a stark black tuxedo, tailored to perfection, paired with a Patek Philippe watch that Linda naturally assumed was a Canal Street knockoff. He walked up to her, his dark eyes sweeping over her form. Linda instinctively crossed her arms over her stomach, a defensive habit she had developed in middle school. I know, she mumbled. It's a lot of fabric. Nicholas gently reached out, taking her hands and uncrossing her arms. His large, calloused thumbs brushed against her knuckles. You look spectacular, Linda, he said. And the terrifying thing was that he sounded completely, utterly sincere. You don't need to hide from anyone tonight. Understood. Linda swallowed hard, nodding mutely. He led her to the car. When she struggled with the seatbelt, a humiliating reality of her size in most luxury vehicles, Nicholas didn't make a big deal out of it. He leaned over, his spicy, expensive cologne wrapping around her senses, and seamlessly adjusted the belt for her, without a single or sideways glance. The drive to the Drake Hotel was a blur of neon lights and quiet, thrumming anxiety. When they handed the keys to the valet and walked into the opulent, chandelier-lit lobby of the hotel, Linda felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She linked her arm through Nicholas's, gripping his bicep. It felt like grabbing hold of a steel beam. Deep breath, cara mia, Nicholas whispered, leaning close to her ear. The Italian pet name made her knees weak. Shoulders back, let them stare. They entered the grand ballroom. The room was a sea of pastel silk, overflowing floral arrangements, and Chicago's upper-middle-class elite. Almost immediately, the murmurs started. Linda felt the eyes on her, the judgmental up-and-down glances at her heavy frame, followed by the wide-eyed, absolute shock when they looked at the godlike man walking possessively by her side. Linda! The shrill voice belonged to Brenda, Linda's mother. Brenda, a tiny neurotic woman in a pale pink dress rushed over. Her eyes darted from Linda's waistline to Nicholas's face, her jaw practically hitting the marble floor. "Mom, this is Nicholas," Linda said, her voice shaking only slightly. "My boyfriend." "Boyfriend?" Brenda repeated, her voice dripping with incredulity. She looked at Nicholas as if he were an alien. "But how? I mean, nice to meet you. I'm Brenda. What do you do for a living, Nicholas?" "I'm in waste management and logistics, Brenda," Nicholas lied smoothly, flashing a dangerously charming smile. "But mostly, I spend my time trying to keep up with your brilliant daughter." Before Brenda could recover from the shock of someone complimenting Linda, the moment Linda had been dreading arrived. "Well, well, well, if it isn't Linda." Linda froze. She turned to see Samuel approaching. He wore a smug, punchable smirk, his arm wrapped tightly around Jessica, a blonde woman so thin she looked like she might snap in a strong breeze. "Samuel," Linda said, her throat tightening. "Didn't expect you to show up, honestly," Samuel sneered, looking Linda up and down with barely concealed disgust. "Thought you might sit this one out. You know the chairs here have armrests, right? Might be a tight squeeze." Linda felt the tears burning the back of her eyes. It was happening exactly as she feared. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but before she could utter a word, Nicholas stepped forward. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He simply shifted his towering frame so he was standing directly in front of Samuel. The ambient temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "And you are?" Nicholas asked, his voice a lethal, silken purr. "Samuel." He puffed his chest out, trying to match Nicholas's alpha energy, but looking like a shivering chihuahua in comparison. "I'm a VP at Morgan Stanley." "A junior VP," Nicholas corrected casually, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "Managing the mid-cap portfolios. Poorly, from what I hear." Samuel paled, his smug expression faltering. "How do you—" "I know a lot of things, Samuel," Nicholas interrupted, stepping half an inch closer. The sheer, overwhelming aura of violence rolling off Nicholas was palpable. "I know that a man who concerns himself with the physical dimensions of a woman out of his league is usually overcompensating for profound inadequacies elsewhere. I also know that if you ever speak to my girlfriend with that tone again, you won't have to worry about your promotion at Morgan Stanley, because you won't have a jaw left to speak with. Do we have an understanding?" Samuel's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Jessica took a frightened step back. Samuel swallowed hard, his eyes wide with genuine terror. I was just joking." "Laugh, then," Nicholas commanded quietly. Samuel let out a pathetic, nervous chuckle, grabbed Jessica's hand, and practically fled toward the open bar. Linda stood frozen, her heart soaring and her mind racing. She stared at Nicholas. "How did you know he was a junior VP?" she whispered. Nicholas winked at her, his terrifying demeanor evaporating into warm charm. "I read his name tag and made an educated guess. Come on, let's get a drink." He led her to the VIP bar. Instead of ordering the standard house wine, Nicholas spoke quietly to the bartender. A moment later, the bartender emerged from the back room, carrying a dusty bottle of Macallan 1926. He poured 2 glasses and handed Nicholas a bill. Nicholas produced a solid, black, heavy metal credit card without a name or numbers on it and tapped it. "That must have cost a fortune," Linda hissed, panicked. "I only have $200. "It's on the house," Nicholas lied effortlessly, handing her the crystal glass. "To the most beautiful woman in the room." They drank, and for the first time in her life, Linda felt invincible. Nicholas pulled her onto the dance floor. He didn't hold her at arm's length. He pulled her flush against his solid chest, his large hand resting firmly on the curve of her lower back, holding her as if she were the most precious, delicate thing in the world. "You're shaking," Nicholas murmured into her hair. "I'm just waiting to wake up," Linda admitted softly, looking up into his dark, fathomless eyes. "Guys like you don't look twice at girls like me." "Guys like me," Nicholas said, his voice lowering to a husky whisper, "spend their whole lives looking for something real in a world full of fakes. You're real, Linda." Linda felt a flush rise to her cheeks. She was actually starting to fall for a man she rented on Craigslist, but the fantasy was about to shatter. Over Nicholas's broad shoulder, Linda noticed the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swing open. Two men entered. They weren't dressed in pastels or tuxedos. They wore cheap, ill-fitting dark suits, and their eyes were scanning the crowd with frantic, deadly intent. One of them reached inside his jacket, the unmistakable bulge of a firearm visible against the fabric. Nicholas's entire body tensed against hers. The warm, charming fake boyfriend vanished in a microsecond, replaced by something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly calculated. His grip on her waist tightened to the point of bruising. He didn't look at the men, but he knew they were there. "Linda," Nicholas whispered, his breath hot against her ear, his tone brooking absolute obedience. "Do not scream. Do not let go of my hand. We are leaving this ballroom right now." Nicholas didn't wait for Linda's brain to process the command. His hand shifted from her lower back to her wrist, his grip like a vice of warm iron, and he pulled. They didn't run. Running would draw attention. Nicholas navigated the crowded ballroom with the terrifying precision of a shark cutting through a school of oblivious fish. He shoved past a cluster of bridesmaids, his broad shoulders clearing a path as he dragged Linda toward the heavy, swinging doors of the catering kitchen. "Nicholas, what are you?" Linda gasped, her size 24 burgundy dress catching on the edge of a cocktail table, sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot, and heads turned, including the heads of the two men in the cheap suits. "Move!" Nicholas barked. The polished facade was entirely gone. He slammed his shoulder into the kitchen doors, dragging Linda into a chaotic world of shouting chefs, clattering stainless steel pans, and the overwhelming smell of roasting prime rib. The kitchen staff froze at the sight of the towering man in the bespoke tuxedo, and the panicked, heavily breathing woman trailing behind him. Linda was suffocating, her thighs rubbed together painfully under the layers of tulle, her lungs burning as she struggled to keep up with his massive, ground-eating strides. "This is it," her mind screamed. "This is a Craigslist killer. I paid $200 to get murdered behind a deep fryer. I can't. Nicholas, please, my shoes," she panted, stumbling over a wet rubber mat. Nicholas didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, all 280 pounds of her. He didn't grunt. He didn't buckle. He hoisted her against his chest as if she weighed no more than a sack of flour, his jaw set in stone. The sheer, terrifying physical strength of the man finally broke through Linda's panic. He kicked open the rear fire exit, bursting out into the humid, garbage-scented air of the loading dock just as the kitchen doors behind them blew open. "Russo!" a voice shouted. A loud, deafening crack split the night air. Brick dust exploded a mere 3 inches from Linda's face. Someone was shooting at them, Actual, real-life bullets. Nicholas dropped Linda behind a massive steel dumpster. "Stay down. Cover your ears," he commanded, his voice eerily calm. From the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket, Nicholas drew a matte black Sig Sauer P226. He didn't fumble. He didn't panic. He stepped out from the cover of the dumpster, raised the weapon with single-handed, terrifying proficiency, and fired twice. Pop, pop, two sickening thuds, followed by a blood-curdling scream echoed in the alley. Linda curled into a ball, shaking uncontrollably, her manicured hands clamped over her ears. A moment later, Nicholas was hauling her back to her feet, his gun casually holstered. The two men from the ballroom were writhing on the concrete, both clutching shattered kneecaps. "The car is at the end of the alley. Run," Nicholas ordered. Linda ran. She ran harder than she ever had in her life, her heels abandoned somewhere near the dumpsters. They piled into the armored Audi A8 just as the sirens began to wail in the distance. Nicholas slammed the transmission into gear, the V8 engine roaring to life, and the car shot out into the Chicago night. He didn't take the main streets. He whipped the steering wheel hard, plunging the Audi down the entrance ramp to Lower Wacker Drive, a subterranean, labyrinthine network of roads running beneath the city. The orange glow of the sodium lights flickered rapidly across his face, illuminating the cold, murderous fury etched into his features. Linda sat in the passenger seat, hyperventilating, her dress torn, her bare feet bleeding, staring at the man she had hired 3 hours ago. "You're not in waste management," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. You're... "I'm the head of the Chicago Syndicate, Linda," Nicholas said, not taking his eyes off the road. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Those men belonged to Carmine Moretti, a rival faction trying to claim the South Side ports. They've been trying to put a bullet in my head for 6 months." Linda's vision tunneled. A mob boss, a literal mafia kingpin. She had gone on Craigslist to spite a junior VP at Morgan Stanley, and she had hired John Gotti's modern-day equivalent. "Oh my God," Linda sobbed, pressing her hands to her face. "You used me. You needed a cover to get into the hotel, and you saw some desperate, fat, pathetic loser in a diner, and thought I'd be the perfect human shield." The Audi screeched, the tires smoking as Nicholas slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a violent halt in a deserted, shadowy stretch of the underground road. The sudden silence in the cabin was deafening. Nicholas turned to her. The cold fury in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning intensity that pinned her to her seat. "Do not ever speak about yourself that way in my presence again," he snarled softly, leaning across the center console. "I am a lot of terrible things, Linda. I am a thief. I am a killer. I am a monster to the men who oppose me. But I do not use women as shields, and I do not play games with women I respect." "Respect?" Linda laughed hysterically, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know me. Look at me, Nicholas. I'm a joke. Samuel was right. I don't fit in your world. I barely fit in a standard restaurant booth." Nicholas reached out, his massive hands gently gripping her face, forcing her to look into his dark, storm-filled eyes. His thumbs wiped away her tears with surprising tenderness. "I look at you," Nicholas said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, intimate register. "I look at you, and I see a woman who walked into a room full of people she knew would judge her. And she stood tall anyway. I see a woman who had the guts to look a stranger in the eye and demand what she was worth, even if it was just $200. In my world, everyone lies. Everyone is a fake. You are the most spectacularly real thing I have ever touched." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "You are beautiful, Linda. Every inch of you. And if Samuel or anyone else ever makes you feel otherwise, I will dismantle their lives, brick by brick." Linda's breath hitched. She searched his face for any sign of mockery, any hint of a cruel joke. But there was nothing but raw, unfiltered devotion. "Now," Nicholas said, pulling back slightly and shifting the car back into drive. "We need to get to a safe house. The night isn't over." They arrived at an ultra-secure penthouse in Fulton Market. The private elevator opened directly into a sprawling modern apartment featuring floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. Within 20 minutes, the penthouse was swarming with Nicholas's men, broad-shouldered enforcers in tailored suits, pacing the hallways, barking orders into burner phones. Linda sat on a massive leather sofa, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the room and the magnitude of the situation. One of Nicholas's lieutenants, an older man named Matteo, with a vicious scar across his neck, had respectfully handed her a warm cup of tea and a pair of Nicholas's cashmere sweatpants to change into. Nicholas was standing by the window, his tuxedo jacket discarded, the sleeves of his white dress shirt rolled up over thick, tattooed forearms. He was on the phone, his voice a low, lethal hum that commanded the absolute silence of the room. "Tell Moretti if he ever points a weapon in the vicinity of my woman again, I won't just kill him. I'll burn his supply lines, I'll seize the ports, and I'll make sure his bloodline ends in that alley." Nicholas hung up the phone, snapping it in half and tossing it into a trash can. He walked over to the sofa and sat down next to Linda. The cushion dipped heavily under his weight. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the night finally wearing off. "It's handled," Nicholas said quietly. "Moretti is backing down. You're safe." Linda gripped the warm mug of tea. She was wearing his sweatpants, which fit her perfectly, and an oversized t-shirt. She felt raw, stripped of her armor, yet bizarrely safe, surrounded by armed Mafia enforcers. "What happens now?" Linda asked, not daring to look at him. "Do I go back to my apartment? Do you need your $200? Nicholas let out a low, rumbling chuckle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the 2 crumpled $100 bills she had given him at the diner. He placed them gently on the glass coffee table. "I'm keeping the money," Nicholas said, his eyes locking onto hers. "It's a retainer." Linda frowned. "A retainer for what?" "For you," Nicholas said, leaning in close. "I meant what I said in the car, Linda. I don't want the plastic women who orbit my world. I don't want someone who smiles and counts my money while waiting for me to catch a bullet. I want a partner. I want a queen who knows what it means to fight for her dignity." "Nicholas, I manage a mid-tier paper supply branch," Linda whispered, her heart hammering wildly. "I'm not a Mafia queen. I don't know how to shoot a gun. I like baking sourdough bread and watching true crime documentaries. I'm fat, I'm loud, and I have a panic attack if the barista gets my Starbucks order wrong." "I'll handle the guns," Nicholas smiled, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You can handle the rest. Let me take care of you, Linda. Let me show you what it feels like to be worshipped exactly as you are." He leaned in, and Linda closed her eyes. When his lips met hers, it wasn't a tentative, polite kiss. It was a claiming. It was a promise signed in blood and fire. His large hands gripped her waist, pulling her soft, full curves flush against his hard, muscular frame. There was no hesitation, no holding back. He devoured her with a desperate, consuming hunger that made Linda's head spin. For the first time in her 28 years, Linda didn't feel the need to suck in her stomach or hide her body. She felt adored. She felt powerful. 6 months later, Linda stepped out of the matte black armored Audi A8, the bitter Chicago wind whipping her hair. She wore a custom-tailored emerald green wool coat that accentuated her lush curves, paired with knee-high leather boots. 2 massive enforcers flanked her instantly, their eyes scanning the street. She walked into the lavish lobby of the Morgan Stanley building in downtown Chicago. She marched past the reception desk, ignoring the protests of the security guard, and pushed open the glass doors to the mid-cap portfolio management floor. Samuel looked up from his cubicle, his face drained of all color. He looked thinner, ragged, with dark circles under his eyes. "Linda," Samuel stammered, dropping his pen. She didn't raise her voice. She walked calmly up to his desk, her presence demanding the attention of the entire floor. "Hello, Samuel," Linda said smoothly. "I heard you've been having a tough quarter. Clients pulling out, accounts being mysteriously frozen. Just terrible luck." Samuel swallowed hard, looking at the 2 imposing men standing silently behind her. "What do you want, Linda?" "I don't want anything," Linda smiled, adjusting the massive 3-carat flawless diamond on her left ring finger. "My fiancé just wanted me to drop off a message. He recently acquired a majority stake in this firm's real estate holdings, and he doesn't like his properties being managed by men who lack personal integrity." Samuel looked like he was about to vomit. "Linda, please. I'm getting married in a month. I can't lose this job." "You should really care more about yourself, Samuel," Linda said, echoing the exact words he had left on that post-it note 3 years ago. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving Samuel to his ruin. When Linda stepped back into the Audi, Nicholas was waiting in the back seat. He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her sweet vanilla scent. "How did it go, Mia Regina?" Nicholas murmured against her skin. "Perfectly," Linda smiled, wrapping her arms around his thick neck. She glanced at the dashboard. Framed perfectly above the center console, encased in thick glass, were 2 crumpled $100 bills. The best investment she had ever made. Did Linda make the right choice, staying with a lethal Mafia boss, or should she have walked away from the danger? Let us know what you think of this crazy true love twist in the comments below. If you loved this dramatic revenge story and want more gripping, real-life romance tales, smash that like button, share with your friends, and hit subscribe so you never miss a video.